Yeah.
Oh, thank God. Like,
can you imagine if they just threw in like some of those like the horse neighing sound effects or something like that?
Off shows up for the first time. It's just the horse neigh.
Hi guys, welcome to LoveCast, the Boys Love Podcast. I'm your host Alexa, and with me are my fellow hosts Pixie and Kayla.
Hi.
Yay. So today's deep dive is a long time coming. We have people who have been asking for us to do a deep dive on this series pretty much since it finished. And now, a year or so, over a year later, we're finally getting to it. But today we're going to be talking about Not Me, which stars everyone's favorites, Off and Gun. We've talked about the series a lot in different list episodes and such on the podcast, but like this time we're really just going to be diving into this series in and of itself and giving it the time it deserves.
Yes.
So to start off with a little synopsis, so it's based around twins, White and Black, who are separated after their parents separate, basically. And after some time, White returns to England. And long story short, he finds out his twin Black is in a coma. And he kind of wants to get to the root of what happened, figure out who hurt him, kind of avenge his brother. And to do that, he ends up basically disguising himself as his brother and like infiltrating himself into the little like political gang that his brother was a part of and kind of figure out exactly what he was into. And in that gang, he meets Sean, who is played by Off. Black and White are both played by Gunn. And Sean can kind of tell right away that this is not the Black he knew. So, you know, they're kind of like distrustful of each other, and he can kind of tell something's going on. And in true BL fashion, that eventually turns into romance. But the story is a lot more than romance. There's a lot of political and social commentary, a lot of really strong secondary and supporting characters. And yeah, there's just a lot to talk about around it. So let's just dive right into it. Starting with the overall story, like things like plot, writing, and theme. Yeah, I feel like a lot of people were like very surprised with how outwardly political this show was in its plot, especially coming from GMMTV, which doesn't have, I mean, there are certain directors and people who have definitely taken political stances in their shows. But I think this is one of the most like outwardly political, where politics and social commentary are such an integral part of the plot. This is like one of very few shows that they've done that are so much, and like where politics and social commentary is so ingrained in the plot. So I think that made it stand out for a lot of people, and it's differentiated it from a lot of other BL shows for a lot of people.
Yeah, I was wondering if like, because of the plot being so politically heavy, is that the reason why they didn't push it as much as they did other shows? Maybe. But yeah, at some parts that I feel like the plot was a little bit hard to follow because of like all the heavy politics. Like, in a show like this, you don't get the time to really, what do you call it? Like, really dive into the whole situation. And I feel like there's a lot of things that isn't explained at all. And I did have some moments in the plot where I was just like, I think this is what they're working their way up towards happening, but it doesn't happen. And I'm just like, okay, so why were we doing this in the first place, kind of thing. Like the whole fight with this corrupt politician and everything. Like, I genuinely thought like he was gonna beat his ass in that bathroom. like they were full on beat down, but no.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a series that I feel like you need a lot of background knowledge to fully understand, which is why getting to watch it and then like going on Twitter right after and like seeing Thai people explain the politics behind it and like why this is really important or that's really important, it helped so much in the, I guess, the watching element of it, because you just understood it better when you had people explaining to you the details that you just don't really pick up as an international fan.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like even like the director Nucci and a lot of the production and the staff involved with the series were very active on social media as well, kind of jumping in to help explain where they were coming with certain things and where they're coming from with certain things and what certain things symbolize for them and stuff like that. So yeah, I think if you were just kind of like watching it like on its own without the community aspect, I think I can understand, especially if you're not a Thai person. I mean, in general, like the general like social commentary that they were going for obviously comes across, but a lot of like the individual political situations that are specific to Thailand probably wouldn't be picked up on. So it was definitely one where having Thai fans and Thai people like chiming in and explaining things was like, I feel like kind of integral to being able to really like, I guess, get the full experience that they wanted you to have, if that makes sense with the show.
Yeah, I think that's like an issue when you get these shows that are more than just like entertainment and fluff that has more meaning behind them. There's this whole language barrier that can't really be solved by the translations. I know that usually a lot of things pop up on Twitter and stuff with fans explaining that, okay, this translation wasn't really
a little bit off,
what the whole thing meant, but they understand why they used that translation, but the meaning is different if you look at it differently. And that's just a thing we need to deal with, not knowing the language. And even if you knew the language, if you weren't born there or lived there for a really long time, it's hard to pick up on stuff like that.
Nuances. Yeah, I think translations can be really hard when it comes to shows like this, and shows that are very like dialogue heavy and where the dialogue has a lot of nuance in it, because obviously like the translators are probably on a very tight schedule and they have a lot to work through, so they're probably just translating it in the simplest way they know how that still gets the point across to some degree. But you know, you lose a lot of the nuance and the deeper context for what's being said, I think, in that case. So, and
sometimes these translators aren't actually native Thai people, so they wouldn't like know the full context of it, if so. Yeah. I kind of miss the Pink Milk translations, just because you got like the commentary about.
Pink Milk subs, they were truly the GOAT of Thai BL translations. I mean,
anyone who hasn't seen one of the translations, you should look up what's it called, with
Service?
Yes, but no.
Two Moons.
That
was thank you, Heather, for that.
It was hilarious. Like, just reading the comments.
Yeah, because they like explain the context of things, but also their author's notes were just so funny. And they would also give their thoughts on like what was going on in the plot too. But yeah, so it's nice to have like instant translations on things. But you know, I think a lot of the times things like those author notes and putting that extra context in can really help with shows like this, even if it takes a little longer to get the translations out. But yeah. So like overall, what were your thoughts about the general like writing and how the story played out?
I think like the like overall it's a really good story, and for being so politically heavy, they did it in a good way that it wasn't overly complicated, which meant you could still follow along. And I do, like I said, I think there's some spots that it felt like sort of something was missing, or they were going down a route where they sort of forgot what they were doing and just like, hello. But generally, like it's a good paced story, and there's always something happening, and it's got like great rewatch value to it, and the acting is fantastic.
Yeah. I think the show, like, in general, also in terms of writing, had a good balance. Like, I think it can be hard for shows that are trying to be romance, but also tackle these, like, nitty gritty, more political topics. Like, I think it can be easy to fall, you know, really heavy into the political aspect and lose out on the romance, which is also a staple, or not do the political, you know, darker topics you're trying to tackle justice because you're focusing more on the romance. So it's a really hard place to find a balance between. And like in general, I think, you know, between both White and Sean and Dan and Yoke, that's their names, right? Yeah. Dan and Yoke. I was like, that is their names. Dan, but like between those two, as like the main, I guess, romantic pairings in the show, I think there was a pretty good balance between like tying the romance into the plot and the politics, and also giving the romance time while not losing out on the politics as much. So I thought they did a pretty good job with the balance between the two. Yeah.
Can I say, like, one thing I didn't quite understand with the plot, that I think they didn't dive enough into, is the whole relationship between Black and, God, I can't remember his name. The one that, the
Todd.
friend... Todd. Yes, Black and Todd. I don't get it.
I agree with that.
I never got it. Like, there's some homoerotic stuff going on here, but they're trying to kill each other, but what is going on?
That's something I noticed when I was watching again, is that there's some weird context between Black and Todd, and they never explore it. You just know that they don't like each other, but at the same time, they used to be really close. Yeah. So it's like
when they're trying to kill each other at some time, like it does look like they're just going to start making out at any point.
It does. Another plot thing that I remember when I first watched it, I was really confused about was Graham and Eugene. Because they kind of try to trick you in the beginning into thinking that Graham likes Black. But then it switches and you find out that Graham actually liked Eugene, who is Black's girlfriend. And I guess it makes sense that they're trying to pull a switcheroo, but in the moment I was like, this doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't.
I guess especially because of how we saw Graham act towards White when he was pretending to be Black. Like there was just something there that again was never fully explored. I guess they're just really good friends. I don't know.
Think like even Eugene and Black's relationship really isn't fleshed out at all. Like, why were they together? They don't seem like they like each other.
I feel like Graham had really good chemistry with the Nooch. Like, they would have like some really cute flirty moments that I was like, see, that would have been cool to expand on. Cool. And kind of like give like some trans romantic representation in that aspect. And they had like this really good flirty chemistry whenever they had like scenes together. But I agree that I didn't really get much from Graham and Eugene, and it felt kind of just like they wanted to put two pretty heterosexual people together, I guess, in the end.
It felt a little forced. It did feel forced.
It did.
I can agree with that.
I was like, does he even like her? It was weird, like, because sometimes it feels like he almost has just like a fixation on her instead of actually liking her.
Yeah. Some people are against having straight couples and BLs, and I'm just like, I'm fine with that. Like, I'm fine with like the token straight couple. That's fine. Like, we have enough like straight shows with the token gay couple in it.
Yeah.
Let's do the switcheroo. It's fine. Let the straights have their room. I'm just saying.
It deserves representation
it needs to
too.
make sense. It's like it just they forced it. There's no other words for it.
Yeah. Yeah, because I know also in like that same vein, a lot of people were like really into Eugene and what was her Look June's character? I can't remember her character's name. Namo, was it? I can't.
The girl that Sean.
Yeah, I think like people were just like, ooh, there's like potential for some like sapphic representation there. Yeah. And I feel like in the end, like Eugene and Graham was like the last thing that people wanted to see together.
I had the
like
same,
they had chemistry with everyone else.
You know why? I sat with the same feeling as I did when I watched God, why I can't remember names today, but the other Afghan show that
Theory of
is
Love?
old.
Oh, with Earth and White.
Theory of Love. With White
and White, your fave chip.
I sat with the exact same feelings this time.
You know what? True.
Like, it just didn't feel like it was meant to be.
It was forced.
Yeah. Like, honestly, I'm okay with all the other, like, plot things, like how they worked out, but the Graham and Eugene thing is, I think that's the one thing that I'm like, I don't know about that.
Yeah. So, like, obviously the themes of this show were very, like, politically oriented. I feel like it was very, like, very much like fighting for equality, very anti-capitalist, very like kind of anti-cop, but at the same time propaganda, because obviously Yoke does end up with a cop.
Cops are bad.
So, you know, I mean, they went heavy on like a lot of different themes there. And I just think, I don't know, I think it was really cool to see. I think like I didn't expect a show like that, and I feel like for me personally, like it had a lot of weight, and especially like knowing a lot of the context behind the political climate in Thailand and what Thai fans are kind of saying about like how timely some of these scenes and commentaries are. I just think it was really cool to see them tackle like all of the themes that they did. I don't know. It's just like, I mean, you know, I'm sure like some of them could have been, honestly, I don't even know if some of them could have been handled better, because I feel like for me, they like all kind of got to the point that they were trying to achieve. And as an outsider, I feel like as an outsider who's like not from Thailand, I feel like I was able to understand like what they were trying to say. And at the end of the day, I feel like it wasn't really a commentary for me, you know, like I was just kind of viewing it as like a non-Thai person. So I feel like I can't say if they could have done things better or not, but I just appreciate that they went there, I guess.
Yeah. I can agree with
I remember there was a question on that test that White had to do, and it mentioned Black Lives Matter, and that was like such a big thing that the test mentioned Black Lives Matter. It's just like even the small details like that play into the bigger themes of police brutality and corruption and stuff like that.
Yeah, this acknowledgement that like our communities kind of see each other, and although like our fights aren't exactly the same, when you go into the details, like the overarching like desire that we have, I feel like we're kind of the same in that way. And it's a really cool way to kind of like connect communities across like different nations and nationalities and ethnicities and things like that. So yeah. And let's move into talking about like the acting and the characters and stuff like that. I think we've talked a lot about how blown away, especially we were by Off in this role, and how like it was such a departure from the characters that he usually is given in shows, where he's typically very much like the kind of goofy comedic relief ladies man that ends up gay type situation. So it was really cool to see him kind of like challenge himself in this role, and I feel like it really paid off because he was amazing in the show, honestly.
Yeah. And I mean, like, Gunn is incredible as well. Like, but we expected that. We've talked about this before, but some people were complaining before the show came out that Gunn wouldn't be able to play a gangster.
Because his visual doesn't fit.
Yeah, because he's supposed to be the cutesy, typical stereotype. But like we already said before the show came out that this isn't a problem for Gunn. He is absolutely amazing, so he's gonna kill it, and he did. He was amazing. But with Off, it's just the general growth that he's had, and just like being able to showcase that for the first time was amazing.
Yeah.
My only like real like it's not even the acting, but okay, the jumping.
People do clown on the jumping.
It's so bad.
The amount of memes I've seen about them like jumping buildings and shit like that.
No one jumps like that. Like
they're like jumping like superheroes.
They do.
Yeah. Oh my god, that
Gumpa's
was
training.
That was bad. Like, I don't know. They should have gotten like a freestyle like jump. What do you call them when they jump from buildings and stuff?
Parkour person.
Parkour. Yeah, they should have gotten one of those to like help them,
like
because that was so bad.
It was pretty corny.
It makes me laugh.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also think for me, First really stood out in this role. I think for me, this was probably the first thing that I'd seen him in, because I didn't watch The Shipper. I didn't watch Blacklist. I know those were some of his other like main roles that he's had. And I was like really blown away by his performance. He was really a standout for me.
Yeah, I can agree. Like in The Shipper, he's good, but he's sort of forgettable. I can't really remember much of him in that show. I think the other guys stole away his presence. But he and Gavin did a really good job. Like, I believed that relationship. Like, I believed those emotions. Even though, like, I'm totally here for First and Cow Tongue. Like, they are meant to be soulmates. Okay? But Gavin and First were doing it. I mean...
it was a moment in time.
There was just, like, so much, like, tension and intimacy in those scenes. Like, the sketching scenes and stuff. I was like... Oh my goodness, like, I shouldn't be here right now. And like, I mean, we can get into the whole,
like the lovesick puppy that's just like chasing down this boy all over the place. But he does that so well. Like it was the first time I really noticed First as well. Like, really, really noticed him. And
Heather said that Gavin and First are such great actors that they can have chemistry with anyone. And I feel like that's why we have the whole Gavin pod, Cow Tongue, First schoolwear that we have discussed before. And I guess now Kristen is an extension off of that, since they have Be My Favorite.
Singto now.
Don't bring Singto into it.
Don't bring Singto into this.
Oh my god.
But yeah, it's cool to see like how different they are with like their different partners in like such a short period of time. And I feel like they've been able to like showcase, like, especially at first, like he showcases different aspects of his acting with Gawin versus Cow Tongue. And I think like you get to see cool sides of him in both.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I was really impressed by Gawin, honestly, because the only thing I could remember him being in was Dark Blue Kiss, and it still like has
Iconic.
a very like comedic air to it.
True.
So like seeing Gawin play a more serious role, like I remember he made me cry during that scene where First is like sketching him, because like you could just see all the regret he was harboring just like on his face and in his body language, and it just made me feel awful. Like he did so well portraying that. I was really impressed by Gawin.
Yeah. There is something with this whole like story and this whole show that really lets the actors come out of their skins, like, and really really like plays to their strengths and show off their skills. And
Go ahead.
Is it because of the show or is it because of the director?
Yeah, I was it kind of made me think of like when we talked to Lit, how he was saying like there's this line that you have to approach with actors of getting them to like drop their image and like stop being so concerned about how like they look physically, but also how like they might be perceived by their fans or whoever by playing certain characters. And I'm sure Nucci as the director probably had that same, like, had to have those same conversations with them. But I feel like the nature of the show kind of like, because they're already tapping into this dark, gritty, it's not meant to be pretty and light and flowery kind of role. Maybe it makes it a little bit, maybe it makes it a little bit easier for them to kind of like drop their like persona, like their pretty boy persona that they're used to having to keep on, and kind of like delve into like different aspects of their like acting repertoire. I don't know, but yeah, I think it really did like allow a lot of the cast to like showcase some really new sides of their acting, which was awesome to see.
Yeah.
And like I feel like we have to talk about like Papang as Gunpa, an icon, honestly. Yes. I feel like Gunpa is like everyone's like fandom father now, and he's like not even like, Papang is what, like 20, oh he's 30, well, so he could be someone's dad if he really wanted to be. But I feel like because of the role that he played in the show, he kind of has like the fandom kind of like accepted him as their father. And like Singh was really good as Todd, even if he wasn't as present. And I feel like they just had like a really strong cast all around.
Yeah, I agree. Like even with like how unexplained Todd is, it's still like a character that you remember from the show. I think that tension. All of the characters are really memorable, and they do have like a really big cast.
Yeah, I feel like everyone really brought it for the roles that they were given. So it's definitely some of like the strongest acting that I remember seeing from like GMMTV, all around strongest acting. So yeah, they really brought it there. Let's talk a little bit about the production. So obviously this was directed by Nucci. So, you know, as a trans woman, I feel like her perspective that she was able to bring into the like political and social aspect of the story that was trying to be told was like, I mean, the show wouldn't have been what it was without her, I think. And it can be seen in a lot of the way she's talked about it, and like the talks that she's given about it, the conversations that she's had on social media. Like I think her as like, this is one of the things where like, I feel like the directing really kind of made the show, like, and I think the acting also played into that as well, but I think it was very much heavy on like the directing and the power that the directing had on how the show came off and how it was perceived.
Yeah, Like, she knew the image that they wanted to portray, and they went for it, like, all out. And I feel like everybody had to agree on that image, like, all the staff and the cast. And it just, like, it seemed like everyone worked together really well to bring it to life.
Yeah.
Do you feel like this is one of the shows from GMMTV with the best sound as well? Like, I always have, like, a gripe with sound in these shows because they need to hire someone that knows how to do sound because it's usually terrible. But I can't remember really getting distracted by anything bad with the sound in this show at all. Like, I wasn't thinking about it at all. Which is a good thing because it usually annoys me.
I can't remember.
There wasn't any
in particular.
No, I didn't notice any weird sound that we usually get. Yeah, definitely not.
Yeah, and I guess it wasn't as heavy on, just with the nature of the show, it wasn't as heavy on those sound effects that Pixie just loves so much.
I don't think there are any.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Like,
can you imagine if they just threw in like some of those like the horse neighing sound effects or something like that?
Off shows up for the first time. It's just the horse neigh. No, I'm so glad they didn't try to include humor in this show because it may have really ruined the vibe.
Yeah. No, I agree completely. So yeah, I mean, in terms of like directing, editing, sound, I feel like everything was really just like solid all around. I don't really have anything bad to say about it in any way.
They had an aesthetic, they went for it.
And it paid off
so well.
Yeah. Yeah, so we have some like topics that we wanted to like kind of dive deeper into. So one of the things was like how White's dilemma and his privilege and like his sheltered upbringing as having lived abroad with his dad compared to Black, how that kind of impacted his character and his development throughout the show.
Yeah. I find it really interesting how he goes from thinking like that he gets the opportunities he does because he's good or smart or stuff like that to realizing that it's mostly because of who his dad knows. And it's so interesting to see his shift when he discovers, because that's a huge issue nowadays where people don't realize the privilege they have because they have difficulties in their lives and they're working hard, so they just don't see the privilege. And it's like, it's so interesting to see someone having that realization and just working through it.
Yeah.
So I really like that they included that.
Yeah. And it's so interesting, like, watching back that moment he has the realization, because it's like, you see it really happen whenever he goes in to take, like, the test or whatever for the ministry. And he meets this guy there who is also, like, in consideration for the role or whatever. And they end up talking about, like, the Taoist house fire. And then they, like, part ways. And then White comes back later on for the interview and he sees the guy again. And the guy's asking him, like, oh, are you, like, nervous about the interview? And White's like, no, I'm not nervous. I think my skills will speak for themselves. And then, like, the guy starts talking about, like, how hard he's had it trying to get to this point and how he had to be, like, extraordinary, basically, to beat out all of the rich kids who had more privilege than him. And then literally they call up White by his full name and the guy realizes that he's there because he's the diplomat's son. And he's like, oh, no wonder you aren't nervous. And that you just, like, see in White's eyes that he finally is starting to get it, where he's like, oh, this really isn't as fair as I thought it was. And I really am here because my dad has power and all this stuff. Like, it's really it's really interesting to see that moment where it starts to change.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's really interesting character development to kind of see him work through. In combination,
and it's a subtle thing. It's not like in your face. It happens over time, very subtly. Like you can't miss it, but still, it's not forced. If you know what I mean, it's just a reality, and it's there. And
yeah. It's like I almost want to say like the reality of it feels realistic in the way that it was portrayed, in the way that 100%. Gunn acted it.
I have no doubt that scenario has happened plenty of times.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So another thing we had on here was like Sean's vendetta against Tawi, and obviously the death of his father being due to the police.
I mean, I understand Sean's anger. I do sometimes I get like stuck on him being too angry. If you know what I mean. But I get it. I understand. Like, they give you enough backstory after a time to make you understand why. But he does go from being an extremely angry character to softening up a lot. Like, imagine the man you see at the beginning in the first episode put up against the man who is letting this boy beat the shit out of him without raising a hand.
Yeah. I think there could be something to say about this idea of like letting anger fuel you in your actions, and how that's not necessarily sustainable over a long period of time. Because I think the thing with anger is like, it's very like in the moment. So you react out of like this initial like anger and this hatred, and obviously we know Sean's anger comes from a very justified place, but I think there could be some realization to him throughout the series that like anger and alone isn't enough to like sustain you and keep you going.
Yeah, and it's not like getting revenge if you're just going around being angry and trying to get revenge. Like, the only one it affects is you. Right?
Yeah. I think there's an element of like seeing what he was working for was a lot bigger than just his own personal need for like revenge almost, and like having this moment of like seeing how much bigger the whole movement is. Which I think is kind of showcased in like the pride flag scene, which we've talked about like time and time again, and him just like watching everyone around him and kind of having this moment of like, this means a lot to all of these people as well, and it's a lot bigger than like I ever could have thought it to be.
Yeah, I feel like with all these kids that Gumpa's taking in, it sort of feel like they're all lost somehow and need something to focus on. And it's very unhealthy for Sean, because all of his focus goes into his hatred, and the whole gang sort of fuels that, even though they're there for different reasons. And I think when he starts having feelings for White, that it sort of shifts his priority, shifts his cause onto White.
Yeah. I kind of watch Sean's like slowly softening over time, kind of as him getting worn down and just feeling like the situation is hopeless. Because if you're thinking of it from his perspective, it's like his dad got killed for trafficking drugs, but Tawi is also trafficking drugs, and he's the reason that drugs are being trafficked in the first place. So it's just kind of like seeing just like all this unfairness play out time and time again, no matter like what they do. So I feel like that also contributes to it, along with just the realization that the cause is a lot bigger than he himself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah. Heather says, and I think it's Sean realizing that maybe he doesn't need to, this
That's
idea
true.
that he doesn't need to be the only person doing anything, and he has like not only like his immediate people around him that he can rely on, but like we said before, there are more people out there. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think like even the scene when they with the flag and when they're at the Pride parade and stuff like that also shows like how a community that like comes together and help each other and trust each other, and that's part of like making him realize that okay, there is a different way to do this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Alrighty, let's talk about Dan and Yoke. So Dan falling for a cop, but also like Dan's internal, or Yoke falling for a cop. I'm sorry, I said Dan falling for a cop, I believe. So Yoke falling for a cop, but also like Dan's realization as a police officer that like the institution is corrupt, and kind of, you know, like was mentioned before, feeling guilt over that and hopeless in that situation in his own way. And that one I think was especially timely with the conversations around police brutality that were happening worldwide, and this idea of like not all cops are bad, or no cops are good, but because they're participating in this corrupted institution that harms people, so if you're part of it, then that makes you bad. And kind of like this debate that I think people have been having across the world and is still ongoing today, but especially like in 2021 and early 2022 was very, very timely and very heated. And like also Yoke struggling with, you know, realizing the person that he fell in love with was part of an institution that he was so against, and how that impacted him, and how that all played out. I think it was just like a really interesting, very much not black and white depiction of their story, I think they handled it in a really interesting way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just like, okay, the whole like cop situation and the whole premise of it. Like I read the news, I watch what's happening in America and other places in the world with cops and stuff, but it's just like a look from look on the outside, because this isn't really an issue here, which is extremely it's obviously I'm very privileged to live in a country where we don't have issues about like that, but I don't think like I don't have a lot to say about it, because
that's fair.
It's very outside for me.
Yeah. I was just gonna, because there's so many like different directions that I could go with this on, but I'm just thinking about how Dan eventually betrays Yoke, and like what that means, that he chose the institution over Yoke. I don't know. I just wanted to mention that, because
from a storytelling point of view, that is very like Sophie's Choice sort of. He's a bad cop if he doesn't do what the institution is saying he should. Like, he's very like, he got into the job for a reason, and if he suddenly goes against the institution, like that's the definition of like being bad. Like he isn't doing his job, he's doing illegal shit, like it goes against every grain of his being. But at the same time, he's working for a corrupt institution, right? So you have this struggle with, okay, which is the worst part here. Do I listen to these bad people, or do I like go vigilante and just like it's bad either way, right? So, and it's obviously it's framed towards one side in the show because it's very like anti-government, anti-cop. But from his point of view and like characterization and plot, I can see his struggle with it. And I understand why he did it, because I can see that, like, to him, going against the cops and everything, it's literally like the worst thing he could do.
Yeah.
Especially for a person that he hasn't known that long. Like, okay, they great chemistry, they're doing good, but they didn't know each other for that long. I'm just saying.
Yeah. I was gonna say what Heather mentioned about him also creating art that criticizes the police and the government, because that's another layer of it that is, it shows you that for a while now, probably ever since he, spoiler alert, like shot Sean's dad. Yes. Ever since then, he has felt like he's doing something wrong. Like in his gut, he's really felt it. But it's like Pixie said, how do you get out of that situation that you're in?
Because he's doing that, the graffiti, he's doing it anonymously. He's not, it's against everything that he stands for to actually like go out and do this publicly. Like, he could leave the force, he could like rebel or whatever, but he doesn't. He goes anonymously and tries to do things his own way, without like doing anything big that will reveal that, because it becomes more true if he actually like publicly goes against it.
Yeah, and then at the same time, he like uses it as a way to ease like the guilt that he's having around still being involved in the police force and the corruption. Yeah. So he's really just like, dude has a lot of complex shit going on. That's why I'm saying
Sophie's choice. Like, if dude can not win, whatever he does, he can't win.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really interesting character arc that they gave him. And I think mentioning his art kind of like leads into, well, the section we had here kind of talking about like some of the Easter eggs in the show. So it was really like one of the big things was that the graffiti that he was doing throughout the show was based on an actual Thai artist who makes like that political art in real life. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing their art name right, but Bapo Boy. So like if you go on their Instagram, you can see like a lot of the art that was inspired by in the show is like his art. And he makes these political pieces and kind of puts them out there in the real world. So it was really cool to see them like showcase an actual like political artist and kind of call out to the real life political situation in that way, I think.
Yeah, it's like a way that they're showing a real, like they are actually like making a proper political statement with this show, right? Anyone can do anything just for views or shock value or stuff like that, but this is like tangible proof that they actually are trying to make a difference with this story, trying to showcase issues instead of just trying to earn money off issues.
Yeah, they're showing their like support of the real life movements that are going on in a very like tangible way, that people can connect to another person involved in the political movements in their actual society. So it's a really interesting way to connect them.
Yeah, that also reminds me of how the pride scenes in the show, the QR codes actually led to like marriage equality petitions and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like the
I remember
smallest
seeing
things.
like and I know that I think yeah, it was at like the actual Pride parade that year in Thailand that they like basically recreated the scene from Not Me. And I'm not sure, like it might be something that they do similarly that every year at their Pride. But I know like a lot of people made the connection of them kind of like having this Pride scene in Not Me earlier this year. And then like the same scene, like the same thing happening at their, you know, actual Pride parade that they had. That year. So yeah, it was really cool to see how they connected that and tied it into the queer community in real life and the things that they're fighting for.
Yeah.
Heather said, did you talk about the scene of the gang getting released from the back of the cop car and that it was based on a real event?
Yeah, that really happened, which is funny because I remember when the final episode of Not Me aired, everyone was like, this ending is so unrealistic. This would never happen. And I was like, actually, it did happen. Protesters did like overrun a cop vehicle or whatever and try to release protesters, I think, that they had arrested. So it did happen. Yeah.
It's just so cool to see how, you know, they've tied it into these moments that people can connect with in society. And I think it just really stands to hammer in the point that we've been saying all along and that the show has been saying all along is that they're talking, like they're making a point about these actual political issues in the show. And they want that to be the focal point of the show. And by connecting them to these real life events that have happened, I think it makes it a lot more tangible for viewers and a lot more difficult for non-political people, I guess, to kind of just write off as a thing that they're doing for dramatization or something like that, because these are things that have actually happened, you know.
It didn't actually happen. No.
Yeah, like this wouldn't happen. And like like Kayla said, like, oh, this is an unrealistic ending, but it's not, you know, like you kind of can't deny it in that fact. So yeah, it's really interesting.
I mean, people will still deny it, but
yeah.
I mean,
but they did everything they can to make sure people don't.
Yeah, it does showcase how really bad it can be, because people, I don't think they think like it's over dramatization in shows, trying like exaggerating stuff, but it really isn't. And people need to realize that this does happen in real life, and it's not just some TV thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Do we want to wrap it up with any particular scenes that impacted us in the show? And we know the obvious one is the pride flag scene. I think that's probably the one specific scene from a BL that we have talked about the most on this podcast is that pride flag scene. And it's for a reason. Well, it deserves it. It's never going to get old. It's literally like one of the best scenes I've seen in a television show to date. Like, there was a reason we talked about it.
When you have a show, like when you have a scene like that people remember so much that they recreate it, and it's so well shot, and it's so impactful for anyone watching.
Yeah. It's
like, you're not getting away from this being like a LGBTQ plus thing.
Yeah.
Like, you can't pretend that this isn't a queer thing. Like, this is happening.
Putting this shit in your face, and you are gonna love it. And I did.
Yes.
Yeah.
Heather said that, and Sean and White fucking bringing Black out of being the thing that brings Black out of his coma. Like, the two most talked about scenes from the show. The duality of the media. Like, oh my God. I honestly forgot about that.
Yeah, I don't think I thought about that when it happened at all. Like, that wasn't That wasn't in my mind. Like,
I think they were trying to make a point about like the adrenaline and the like accelerated like heart rate and stuff, like the heightened senses that White was feeling at that moment, like connecting to his twin. But like the way he came off was
he needs to get fucked away.
It's just so funny.
He's like, I know something's up.
Oh my god. Okay, the jokes we could make, but
yeah.
I will say the one scene like that stands out that I will always remember is the scene when Black beats the shit out of Sean.
Yeah.
It's stuck in my head. And it's such an emotional scene too, that just seeing Sean, who's so angry and so ready to fight, just taking it. And just like Heather mentioned in the comments earlier, like the self-hatred in him that lets this happen. And it's so heartbreaking because he thinks this is White, and he's for the first time he's trusting and like trusting another human being, and it's just a betrayal.
Yeah. And then I think it's at the end of that scene whenever Black says stay away from his brother. I think it's that scene when he warns him to stay away from his brother, and then Sean realizes like, oh yeah, I haven't been doing stuff with Black. It's been White.
Yeah.
Another scene that I always think about, because I love how dramatic it is after first character Yoke gets shot and he's in the wheelchair in the hospital, and Dan handcuffs him.
Yeah.
And then they're like, that's when they realize, oh, like, he's betraying us, isn't he? And then Graham spits in his face, and it's just like so good. Just like him spitting in his face after all of this. Ugh, it's so good.
Honestly deserved
so
in
dramatic.
that moment.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the Dan and Yoke scenes like were very emotionally heavy for me. Like Heather also mentioned the scene where Dan and Yoke are locking eyes as the elevator doors close. Like there's just like so much tension in them, and I guess it's because of the way the story was set up with them, you know, like the cop and the political gangster, and like the tension that story kind of sets up, that like every scene that they had together was just like very emotionally charged for me to watch. So yeah,
same.
Yeah. Let us know in the comments what your favorite scenes were from Not Me. I almost said Until We Meet Again, and I don't know where that came from. I have no idea why that was just about to come out of my mouth. But yeah, let us know what your favorite scenes were, which ones kind of had the most impact on you. There was so much to pull from that show. There's so many more that could be mentioned, I feel like, so I'm curious to see what other people will say. But yeah, any final thoughts before we kind of wrap it up? No?
I think we got it all.
No, I think we've gone through everything. The only thing, like, I for this story, like, the whole overall story is sort of about duality, if I can call it that. Like, you have Black and White being so different and going into their own like different worlds and experiencing stuff, and you also have Yoke and Dan with the same thing. So it's I feel like that's sort of the theme of it, and yeah, I just love this show. I can't
Me too.
I can't go into a lot of details why, but it's just overall they did such a good job with it.
Yeah, I think like maybe it's a little bit on the money, but like one of the biggest things that I feel like is, I'm losing words, is like comes across in the show is that like even though the characters are named Black and White, nothing in existence is black and white, you know? Like, it's such, like, a cliche takeaway, but, like, all of these character relationships and all of the reasons that they're fighting or not fighting and everything that they're doing is so gray morally, like, you know, just the choices that they're making and things like that. So I feel like that's just, like, one of the...
And Heather said that she really liked that and really happy about Black. He's an asshole at the beginning and he's still an asshole at the end. They didn't try to fix him, and I agree with that.
Morally gray characters can stay morally gray.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand White having the development and changing because of that, but it makes sense for Black to stay an asshole because
he was in a coma for most of it.
He was in a coma in the whole show.
When would he have character development, honestly?
And he doesn't have anything that happens to him that, like, kickstarts it. Because White
Sean
has,
and
like,
White
this
fucking was what made him change as a character.
Yeah.
No, that's what made him so angry.
He's like, I have to wake
they
up.
could make a season 2 just for Black to have some character development.
They could.
Maybe like White can go into a coma and Black can get some. I don't know. That's the proven technique now.
It's a proven technique.
Have we tried that out in real life?
Can I say I loved, like, listening, like, Gunn talking in Russian. That was interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was cool to watch. Yeah. I'm sorry, I just totally lost where I was going with after that conversation. But I guess that's all we have for this week, if no one else has anything to add. So obviously we know that Nami aired over a year ago, but obviously it still sticks in our minds enough to talk about it, and we know it's the same for a lot of other people. So definitely share your thoughts with us down in the comments, over on our social media. Pop in our Discord server and chat with us there. We want to talk about it with you guys and hear about your thoughts. So we'll look forward to seeing what you have to say. And if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Do all those things that help out with the algorithm. Share it with your friends who really like Not Me. We really want to hear everyone's thoughts, so help get the word out there about the episode for us. And it all helps us out in the long run. But yeah, that's all we have for this week, and we will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.